Hi everybody, this is Brett Lonsdale from Lightning Tools and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, or this morning's depending on where you are in the world, the webinar on the Data Viewer client-side web part which has been built under the Sharepoint framework. So I'm Brett Lonsdale from Lightning Tools and I'm the co-founder of Lightning Tools, which we are now dating back to around 12 years. So back in 2007 we launched Lightning Tools, and I'm a Microsoft MVP. We're a gold partner, and also you'll see that there's a couple of different things that we've been doing as far as books and things like that over the years, which is actually a very topical subject for today, since we're going to be talking about data. Actually, Lightning Tools was really founded upon the back of Business Data Catalog back in the day, which obviously evolved into Business Connectivity Services. And this is somewhat going to be a bit of a topic for today, not BCS or BDC itself, but really about accessing line of business systems and data and bringing those into Microsoft SharePoint, or also Microsoft Teams, which you'll see. And if you've got some time on your hands on your commute or anything like that, feel free to listen to us on techsplaining.net as well. So you'll be able to listen to some podcasts where myself and a few other MVPs record some podcasts around Office 365 and related technologies. So what we're going to be talking about today is the Data Viewer. So the Data Viewer is a product that we've actually had around for quite a number of years. There is a bit of a history with our Data Viewer. It dates back to also around the 2007 timeframe. It disappeared for a while, and then it came back in around SharePoint 2013 sort of time frame. But what's key today is the fact that it's actually been built around the SharePoint framework, and specifically version 1.8 of the SharePoint framework, which makes it available for Microsoft Teams as well. And we're one of the first products to be available in Microsoft Teams, so that you can add your solution to a Teams tab and bring in external data. So the history really behind the Data Viewer actually began around, like I said, the 2007 timeframe, when the Business Data Catalog was available, and we recognized that people wanted to style their data a little bit better than what you could do using the out-of-the-box Business Data Catalog web part. So back then, the BDC was read-only. We built a tool that could actually read-write, but you could also go through and style the data very easily as well. So things like conditional formatting and things like that. And in SharePoint 2013, there was a new challenge, and that was that the Design tab had disappeared from the SharePoint Designer, which actually meant that you couldn't use the out-of-the-box data view web part very easily anymore to style ordinary lists, not just external lists, but you couldn't style things like a contact list or a task list or anything like that inside of SharePoint. So we brought the Data Viewer back for 2013 as a full trust web part for SharePoint 2013, and really evolved it to support both SharePoint lists and also external data sources as well. So here we are in SharePoint Online, and specifically modern SharePoint. There's not really a story behind customizing your lists using a no-code solution anymore. Microsoft has made some recent changes using column formatting. So if you've looked at column formatting, it means that you can do a low-code solution. So using some JSON, you can go through and add things like conditional formatting, display icons and display data bars and so on columns within inside your SharePoint lists. Some SharePoint lists, depending on when you get your tenant updates, some SharePoint lists also have some basic conditional formatting capabilities already inside a document library. So things like the modified date or the created by and things like that can be styled now using some very basic conditional formatting. But anything that you want to build, such as data bars or miniature charts or icons or anything, that requires that you write some JSON code inside your SharePoint lists and libraries, which isn't something that the average business user would be able to do. Usually that is still going to require the help of a developer somewhere along the lines. So that's really the purpose of the Data Viewer. Is it's a product that you can add to a SharePoint classic page or also to a modern page, and also now the Microsoft Teams tabs. You can connect to a SharePoint list and easily style it with no code rather than low code, and you can also go through and build charts now as well, which is a new feature, not yet available. We've still got a little bit of polishing to do, but it will be available within the next few weeks for you to go and start using. So really the data viewer is about connecting to siloed data. So it might be that there's lists in different team sites, or there's also external data sources, and those external data sources might reside on premises, or they might also reside in the cloud. So we can connect to them. So if you wanted to connect to a SQL database stored in SQL Azure, then you can do so. So if you have any line of business data that is housed there, you can connect to that very, very easily and begin styling the data and display it, make it available to your users inside your SharePoint communication sites or your SharePoint modern pages or team sites, wherever you feel the need to make that data available. So you're making it more available to them, and you're also making the key data stand out. So anything that we consider things like key financial indicators or key performance indicators or anything like this, you can very easily style the data so that it's grouped correctly, you're showing the right columns of information, and you've got conditional formatting or rules that will highlight key business data. And like I said, we can do that using different styling techniques like the data bars and the icons, and also build charts around that data as well. And that's without any code at all. So you don't have to write any JSON or anything like that in order to achieve those goals. So the data viewer web part, it's built, like I say, under the SharePoint framework. It is available today already, but only with the data grid. It has been available since around November last year. The recent change, like I say, has been the charts and also the redevelopment under the version 1.8 of the framework, which makes it available inside Microsoft Teams as well. So if you are using Microsoft Teams, really, Microsoft's stance on this is, we can have a groupified site, which could also include a Microsoft Teams tab, so you can go through and make your SharePoint content available to two different types of audience, whether they're happy using the browser and connecting to a SharePoint team site, or whether they prefer to use the Microsoft Teams environment to collaborate with their team members. We're making our products available for both of those environments, and it's the same product, the same instance that is available inside those two environments. So you can add our SharePoint framework client-side web part onto a SharePoint page, and you can add the same component into a Teams tab as well, depending on which tool your audience is happier using. So like I say, you can connect to lots of different types of data, apply the formatting easily, and build charts. And these are the data sources that we support. So SharePoint lists, and unlike our roll-up tool, the Lightning Conductor, the data viewer is very much specific on a list. It's not a roll-up tool, so you can connect to a SharePoint list anywhere in the tenant and expose that inside your pages or your sites and teams and style it, but it's not an aggregation tool. It can't roll up multiple lists of the same type or from the same content type, so you're basically exposing a list somewhere else. SQL Azure, OData, and also business connectivity services, external data sources as well. So using SQL Azure, we can connect to that very easily. OData, you can use a lot of software comes with an OData service of sorts. So you can use the existing OData services. We offer authentication to them, or you could also quite easily with Visual Studio expose your expose your on-prem data sources, whether it's Oracle, DB2, SQL on-prem, whatever it might be. You could expose views or tables using an OData service and make that available in the cloud, and then we can basically connect to that OData service using the data viewer to allow you to style that data. And then there's also the business connectivity services data sources as well. So you might be wondering why you'd want to use the data viewer when business connectivity services already comes with a bunch of web parts. It comes with an external list and so on. Well, those web parts and that external list, they're not modern. for one. Even without that, they've not been developed on for quite a few years now, and the external list is very, very difficult to style. It's not even something you can style with JSON. You have to actually style it with XSLT, and the ability to style it is just very, very poor. So that's something that we can do. If you want to connect to an existing business connectivity services data source, and that could be coming from multiple different databases as well, we can go through and style that very easily using the data viewer. Okay, so yeah, BCS web parts are outdated, as mentioned, difficult to modify for external data connectivity. Also, there's the time and the investment involved in actually building the external content type as well. So if you do want to connect to something like SQL Azure, you could do that using BCS, but the data viewer also offers you that capability of connecting directly to SQL Azure and cutting out business connectivity services altogether if all you want to do is display the content within inside a web part. There's also Power BI, which is quite often a question that we get asked. Why are we building a chart web part or a data view web part when there's Power BI? So Power BI obviously also has external connectors. You can connect to lots of different systems using Power BI with the external connector capabilities, and they're getting more and more all the time. And the types of charts and graphs that you can build in Power BI is extremely powerful. However, what we're looking at here is really a different audience of user. We're building a tool that is a no-code tool. It's something that anybody that is a site owner with inside your environment could very quickly and easily build a view of data, style it, and also build charts for their audience, so for their team members. Okay, so you can get up and running very, very easily. And there's also those users that don't necessarily need to use a line of business system. So for instance, we use Dynamic CRM. I hardly ever go into Dynamic CRM. I don't know my way around it, but there's certain information that I find useful from it. So instead of having to fire up Dynamic CRM to get that information that I want, I am in SharePoint every day or I'm in Teams every day. I can have a simple view on my page highlighting the key information that I need to see, and there's absolutely no reason for me to actually be trained on a complex system such as that. Okay, so that's really sort of positioning the product. Let's have a look at the product. So this is all going to be demonstration. You can see here I've got a very empty looking SharePoint team site, and I've also got a very empty looking Microsoft Teams team. So we'll start off here with the SharePoint team site, and then we'll look at Teams afterwards. And the content that I want to connect to, first of all, we've got a couple of lists. So if I find myself find where I need to go, I'm going to go here into the site contents, and just as a very sort of simple scenario, I've got two different lists that we can use. One is a tasks list, and I've also got a sales list as well, which is a custom list. And if we go inside that custom list called sales, you'll see here it's just got some sort of fictional data around sales. So we've got some months, we've got some sales revenue, profit, and cost of sales. Now, like I mentioned, with your modern lists, you can go down to column settings, and you can format columns. Not necessarily inside the custom list environment, but you will find in some lists, like document libraries and things like that, you've got the ability to go through and add column formatting. So that would require you to write the JSON. So if we wanted any of these numbers to stand out, that's what we would need to do, and we'd need to write the code on it using SharePoint out of the box. So for instance, we might want to highlight some of the months where we hit target, or if we made a loss or something like that with inside the list. So that's what we're going to look at first of all. So here on the page, if we go through and edit the page, we can insert the web parts. So we can click onto the plus, do a search for Lightning, so that will return the Lightning adapter and also the data viewer. So we'll add the data viewer on here, and let's just add a couple of instances of that. So what I want to do is show a grid, and we'll also show a chart as well. So we've got two instances of the web part. So working on this bottom one, first of all, I'm going to click onto Configure, and that launches up the Configure Data Viewer dialog, and you will see here that we've got the different data sources that we can connect to. So one of them is SharePoint list. We've also got the Business Connectivity Services, OData, and SQL Azure. And what you'll notice is, depending on which data source we select, the data source tab obviously changes to reflect that selection. So when we select the data source and we've got SharePoint list, it's not just the current site collection that we can connect to. We can connect to pretty much any site within inside the tenant. So that includes modern sites, hub sites, associated sites, etc. We can just basically browse through to a particular list that we want to connect to. So we can go through and expand that, and here is the sales list in question. And we'll come back to that one in just a moment. If we want to connect to business connectivity services, the data source here is prompting us for a namespace and the external content type name. So that might be, for example, Northwind as the namespace, and then customers as the external content type name. And when we hit check availability, that will basically just confirm our connection, and we can map through the finder method and the specific finder method, which, if you're familiar with business connectivity services, the finder method is the one that returns all of the columns and all of the rows. The specific finder returns a specific row based on the identifier. So we can basically map those and then start to select our columns. And then we've also got the OData service as well. So just as a quick example for that, I'm just going to reach out to an OData service here. So I'll choose OData service, click onto data source. I'm going to drop in a service URL. So this is to odata.org, which you can go and try out if you want to. Anybody can go to odata.org and use some sample services to test the capabilities of the product. So I'll paste in the service URL, hit load entities, and in there I now get a list of the different entities that make up that service. So we can go through and select something like products, and when I go to the columns tab, you can see here I've got all of the columns returned from that specific service. So very quickly, let's just get something onto the page, and then we'll come and have a look at connecting to that SharePoint list. So here's like I say, a number of the different columns. Some of these I don't necessarily need to see. It's just going to take up real estate on the page. So yeah, I think that will do. Don't necessarily need product ID either. So we can select the columns from the actual data source, but what I can also do is add a calculated column, and that calculated column can basically be used to concatenate values from this data source, or we could perform some form of mathematical calculation on here, or even do something completely different. We could render an image or anything like that. So if I wanted to, for example, work out the sales tax off the unit price, that's something I could do easily using a calculated column and add that to my view as well. So through here we've got the ability to set the default sort. The end user as well would be able to override that sort when they're visiting the page, but the default sort we can go through and set. So you'll notice that just basically toggles, so we can toggle that to ascending and descending and so on. And if we're sorting on multiple columns, we can also set the primary, secondary, and tertiary sort orders as well, or just go through and set those to off again. And then we've also got filters here that we can set. So if I wanted to only show the continued products, not the discontinued products, we can do that by clicking onto a filter and add our filter in there. You'll notice it picks up the relevant controls for each type of field. Sorry, just deselected this by mistake. So that was on discontinued. So if I go to something like the unit price, you can see here we've got the standard operators, since it's a numerical column that we can use through there. And you've also got the ability to do an advanced filter. So an advanced filter allows you to filter across multiple columns. So we can actually specify the outer operator as being an and or an or, and then build in here multiple conditions across our data as well. And they can be branched and so on, which is very useful. So that's selecting the columns. When we go to the display, we can go through and change the data formatting. So for the unit price column, for example, we could set that to a currency. The discontinued, we can set to a yes, no, true, false, or whatever we want to style that as. Likewise, for each of these, you've got, like I say, the different types. Even the product name can be a hyperlink or just not formatted, since that's a string column. We can change the alignment of those columns, and we can also group by, and we can group by multiple columns as well, which just requires you to select them and then set the grouping order using the numerical drop down. And then we've got the formatting. So we can change the colors of these cells and so on, or we can also conditionally set colors. So what I want to do is go into actually the discontinued field, so we can go through and add some conditional formatting to that. And so like I said, this would require JSON on the actual underlying list if you're using SharePoint out of the box. But what I can do is basically say, yeah, I want to highlight any product that is discontinued. So what we'll do here is if discontinued is equal to false, so reverse logic here, we can go through and either choose a color, so we can change the foreground color or the background color, or I can also go through and set things like an icon. So if it is discontinued, what I'm actually going to do is go through and choose this icon here. And there's all sorts of things that you can go through and select. There's quite a lot of icons in here, so you can find something suitable. But I'm just going to use this spot, and so we'll go through and set a custom color. Now you notice that that's dimmed to begin with. The default choice is there is no color selected. We can also go through and choose the theme color, so that's the blue theme that is currently set on the site, or I can select a custom color. And as I choose the custom colors, I've also got this palette as well, so you can go through and easily go through and select a color that you've previously chosen using this this browser. So if discontinued is, so yeah, let's just set that to red, and we'll save that. And we'll choose to put the icon on the right hand side of the cell and hit save. And then I'm going to add another condition as well, where we set a similar spot, but this time we make that green. And save that color selection, put it on the right hand side, but that's going to be if the discontinued is true. There we go. That's probably the wrong way around. There we are. Okay, so that's my conditional formatting set. So we can save that, and that's set to this discontinued column. What I also want to do is show a data bar. So the units in stock, we want to visually see how many units in stock. So I'm going to set a bit of conditional formatting on that. So there's no condition necessarily required. I can just set here a maximum value. Again, I can pick up the blue theme from the site, or we can go through and set a custom color. We can also adjust the height of that bar as well, and that will give me a data bar, so I can very easily sort of judge my stock with inside a grid view. And there's also a few grid view settings in here as well. So with that, we've got things like sticky headers that we can turn on. We can set a maximum height, how many items per page do we want to display, and so on. So I'll just set that here to 30 or so, and we'll hit save, and we should get our data back. So there we go. We've got the data viewer showing that data coming from that service with the conditional formatting set, and we've also got the data bar displaying as well. Now, a lot of that can also be done by the user. So you need to have at least design permissions to be able to go through and configure the web part like I did. But if you are somebody that maybe has contribute permissions or edit permissions or something like that, and you wish to adjust your view, you can still do that. So notice that on the drop down of each column, you've got the ability to change the sort order. You can modify the filter, and this of course is only going to affect you. You've got the same advanced filters that you can perform, and we've also got the column settings. So you can design the view the way that you want to see it by moving the columns around, so you can move them left or right. We can show and hide columns as well. So they're the two columns I did not select, the supplier ID and the category ID, so I could choose to add those. And we can also do the grouping as well. So actually the grouping would make sense here on the discontinued. So we can go down to the discontinued there and add the grouping. So now I've got all of the discontinued products and all the continued products together within a group. And that can easily be sort of switched off again if you want to turn off the grouping. And if you want to get into the conditional formatting, you can do that. From here, you can clear the conditional formatting, and there's just the More button as well, which allows you to go through and do a bit more styling. So you can do column aliases. So if you didn't want to use discontinued, you wanted to refer to it some other way, you could do that. You can also hard code the width and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's basically styling a grid of data and putting that onto the page here. And if you want to reconfigure it, you can basically click onto the client-side webpack edit control on the top left there, and that gives you access to the configure button. So we can go into the configure button and change what it is we're connecting to. So here we can obviously we could connect to a SQL Azure database as well. So that's specifying the server name, username, password, etc. And that will give you the list of databases and tables and views that you want to connect to. We're going to connect to a list, so I'll choose the grid view for now. And so in here we'll go through and get that sales list. So here you can see all of the columns available for that list, and I'm just going to go through and select those columns that I want to see. And yep, they're the columns selected. So we'll just add a very easy bit of conditional formatting that maybe changes the fore color. If the sales revenue goes over 1 million, there we go. All right, so we can hit save, and there's our data viewer. Obviously, I mistyped that somewhere, maybe too many zeros in there. Okay, so anyway, there's our data viewer. We've got that grid of data. We can adjust the columns as well. And what I want to do now is also go through and add a chart. So, so we can click onto configure again. We can connect to exactly the same SharePoint list, but this time I'm going to change the display provider. So rather than using this grid view, we're going to choose the charts view. And our roadmap is going to include other things as well, like gauges and things like that you'll be able to add in the future. So for now, we'll just choose the charts view. I could limit the number of items returned and set the data refresh interval as well. So that means we can have auto refreshing data on the page, which doesn't require a page refresh. The data source is going to be the same. So we'll just come down to that same sales list. And under the columns tab, I'll go through and select the columns that I want to see once more. So it's exactly the same columns that we've got in the grid. And we'll go to the display tab, and you can see how that now differs from building a grid view to building a chart. So there's two main differences of charts that you can create. We've got combo charts, which include the line, column, area, and scatter, or we've also got pie and donut charts as well that you can choose from. So obviously, depending on which one you choose, will be more sort of relevant to the type of data that you're connecting to. So we'll select each of these columns here. So we've got the sales revenue, the profit, and the cost of sales. And what I can do is style each element in here. So the sales revenue is perhaps the most important. So in the drop down here, I want to show that as a column, and I don't want to have this very sort of sickly green. We'll go for maybe a nice dark blue or something like that, a Lightning Tools blue, and we'll choose that color and save it. But notice you can also put in the hex code or the RGB code if you've got that as well and want to match your sort of custom branding exactly you can do so, or again, you could pick up the theme that is set for the site. Okay, you could also add a trend line to that if you wanted to as well. I'm not going to here. I'm just going to add the columns. I've then got the profit. So the profit, actually, that green actually looks quite good. So we'll have the green against the blue, so that stands out nicely. I can refine that as far as the thickness of the line, the point size as well, and the point whether I want that to be a triangle or a circle, and so on. So that's the actual point on where it changes direction. So we'll just save that. So we've got our green there with the point size being a circle currently. And then at the bottom of the chart here, we've got the profit. The cost of sales. So we'll change that to a area chart, and maybe choose something like red. So again, we can set the opacity and things like that for the area, which you can see there. It is transparent for me, so I can see the profit area. Okay, so that's a very simple chart. There are some chart settings that we can go into as well. So I can provide a chart title. We can choose a legend where we want that legend to appear on the page, and we've also got the ability to sort of change the type of chart as well. So whether it's stacked columns and areas or not, and so on. So we'll save that. And as you can see here, we've now got a page. We can also show or hide any of these options on the command bar as well. So if you don't want to see the ability to export the data or link to our documentation or get help or anything like that, you can show and hide those. But if I just hit publish on the page here, we've now got a very, very simple dashboard created with no code whatsoever. And like I said, that could bring back a list from anywhere within inside your SharePoint environment. So even if it's in a different site collection in your tenant. Okay, so that's building obviously a chart in SharePoint and a grid of data in SharePoint. What I'd like to do is switch across to Microsoft Teams. So here inside Microsoft Teams, we're basically on the same site. So in here I've got the Lightning Data Viewer webinar site, and what we can do is click onto add a tab within inside that team, and this returns for me a number of different products that we can go through and add. So the nice thing about this is these products are actually created using the same framework as what we built the client-side web part in SharePoint for. So it's actually the same product, the same piece of code. So if you do use the data viewer already for SharePoint, once you've got the new features, because you do require the 1.8 version of the framework, then you will be able to add the web part to Teams as well. So I'm going to click onto the Lightning Data Viewer here, and there's the option to post to your channel to say that you've added this web part. We can hit save on that, and that basically goes through and adds the web part as a new tab within inside Microsoft Teams. And so now we can go through and configure it again. So we can click onto configure here, connect to our data source or whatever it might be. So what we'll do is actually go through and build a pie chart based on that task list. So I want to go through and select the charts view, go to the data source tab again. And so here we are, it's highlighting the current site for me, but again, I could go and connect to a list in another SharePoint team site. So we're going to go to this task list here, and then we'll go to columns. And so what I'm going to do is select the task name and the task status, and actually this is one that I didn't practice, so hopefully this will go well. So I've got the task name and the task status selected for my chart. So it's saying that's not suitable, unfortunately. Okay, so I didn't. Let's choose the ID. There we go. So that's better. So what I can do here is go down to Pie or Donut. and we can choose how we want to slice that. So I'm going to slice that by task status. And so that doesn't make sense at the moment, the pie chart, but what I can do is do a group by. So I want to actually sum the ID. So now we've very easily got the percentage of tasks that are in progress as being 60%. We've got 12.1% are completed, and 27.3% haven't started yet. So this is very telling of my typical sort of task list for me personally. So again, we can go through and change colors and things like that. And you've also got this offset control. So the offset control allows me to segment a certain section. So if we wanted to highlight the completed tasks, then we can basically do that using this slider control. So we can adjust how far that is separated from the pie, and of course choose some slightly more tasteful colors. And now I'm going to be under pressure to choose some tasteful colors, but yeah, we can go through and change the colors, which is the main thing. Yeah, perhaps not very tasteful at all, but you get the idea. So yeah, we can group as well as perform an aggregate function on anything that might not actually be numeric. When we go to the chart settings, you've also got the ability to rotate it. So you can rotate that pie, and you can also set this as a donut as opposed to a pie by adjusting the radius in the middle. So we can set that as a donut there. So that's a nice chart setting that we've got. And there's also the ability to set 3D and so on as well. So if you want to have a 3D chart rather than a 2D chart, then you can do that. So as we hit save, there it is. We've very easily got a chart displayed within Microsoft Teams, and just as easy to get a grid as well. So we could set another instance. And what I'll do here is just very quickly, just take a moment, then we'll open up for some questions. We can once again just bring back some data in a grid from our OData service. So this time maybe bring back some customers. There we go, and you've seen the conditional formatting and everything, so I'm just going to hit save here, and there we go. We've got our customer data. So very simple to do, doesn't require any code. You've got exactly the same behavior whether you're in SharePoint or whether you're in Microsoft Teams, and you can, like I say, very easily go through and filter or style that data from directly in the Teams tab itself. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to show you. So what I'm going to do is open up for questions, but also feedback. So this is a product that's very, very close to being finalized for this version, at least, before we take it onto the next part of the roadmap. But yeah, if you want to provide any feedback to us or ask any questions, then simply raise your hand using the raise hand option. I can then unmute you and you can ask your questions. So I think the first one was Kate from Bugaboo. So I'm going to unmute you now, Kate. Hello.
Hi, Brett. Kate.
Hi.
Hi. I joined your webinar on the Lightning Conductor the other day, and we have the aggregation tool. I was wondering, but maybe I already know the answer to the question, can you apply this to an aggregated content at all, the graphs, or will the Lightning Conductor ever have this graph ability for aggregated data?
That's a great question. So so one of the things that is recently available in the .NET framework is also the ability to provide web part connections, and that's the way that we will be going to allow you to build a chart on aggregated content. So although you'll probably think that the two products look quite similar, under the user interface they're extremely different, since one's an aggregation tool, one's really an external data source tool. But the ability to build the chart would be useful on aggregated content. So yes, you will be able to do that. It's on our roadmap to basically aggregate the content in the Lightning connector and then connect it to a data viewer to build your web part connection. And that effectively would provide that table of content from the Lightning connector as a data source to the data viewer.
So you'd have to have both products and then connect them later.
Yes, yes,
It?
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. And when will that become available? Just
Um,
roadmap-wise?
Yeah, so I would put that sort of beginning of the third quarter before we have that
Okay.
available.
All right. Cool.
All right. Does that answer all your questions, Kate?
Yeah, for now, I'm looking in a way to create a dashboard for multiple projects that we're running within Portfolio, aggregating the content and then visualizing it. So that's what why I was interested in this tool.
Fantastic. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Well, we'll keep you
Thank you.
informed on how we go with that.
Yeah, that's great.
All
Thanks.
right. Thanks a lot, Kate. Okay, I think I saw another hand raise here. So, Sudhir, hand's just gone down, Sudhir. Sudhir, did you have a question? Hello, this is Brett. Do you have a question, Sudhir? Perhaps not. Okay. I see you've raised your hand again, so let me just try one more time. So there, maybe a microphone issue, but okay, no problem. Okay, I don't see any of the hands raised. So if you do have any questions or want to provide us any feedback on the product, you can email me. So it's brett@lightningtools.com. That's BRETT, brett@lightningtools.com. You can also request a demo environment as well. So if you'd like to actually have a play with the product as it is today with the charting abilities and so on, then please just drop an email to sales@lightningtools.com. They'll be able to create a environment for you to test the product in our environment. So that saves you from the hassle of deploying to the app catalog and getting approval for that if that's required. So please request a demo environment from us. We'll create a modern site for you, deploy the web part along with some content so you can start to really sort of focus on the data viewer and its capabilities. Yeah, you can also go through and download it. So as of today, you can download it. Based on the nature of the SharePoint framework, as soon as the extra features are available through the CDN, you'll be able to get those updates. So you can go to lightningtools.com. The link is here. Basically, rather than trying to remember a URL, if you go to lightningtools.com and from the products menu, go to the data viewer, which you'll see highlighted as a new product, the data viewer SPFx, and you can download it and install it to your app catalog from there. And that way, obviously, you'll be able to connect to your own data and test it that way. All right. So yeah, unless there's any other questions. Just checking on Kate here. Kate, did you have another question?
Hi. Yeah, how much does it sorry, how much does it cost?
Okay, so cost-wise, you can actually get to again. I'll point you to the area where you can see the pricing. So if you go to the website again, go to the product page. There's a link to the pricing on there, and you'll see we've got 3 different categories. So it's based on user licenses, but anybody that is an existing customer also gets 25% off the second product as well. So as you own the Lightning connector, you'd be entitled to that.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Thanks.
All right, no problem. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I hope you found that useful. Again, if you have any other questions, please email brett@lightningtools.com. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending. Hopefully, we'll see you on a future webinar. We have one on our Social Squared tool, which is a discussion forum product, and that is also built under the SharePoint framework, and we'll be doing that webinar on the 11th of April. So please sign up for that one, and you'll be able to see some of the other work that we've been doing in Teams and also for SharePoint using a discussion forum tool. So look forward to seeing you then. Okay, many thanks.